topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Great to have you. This program has been on air and been provided to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. If we have not met before and you don't know me, I'm an organizational psychologist and logotherapist, speaker, and author. And my team and I at Gusto now help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by articulating their purpose and building inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose to turn those companies from a flatline EKG to a vibrant destination workplace. There, people are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, can grow into their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, alisecortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, we have with us Dr. Roger Firestien, who has trained more people to lead the creative process than anyone else in the world. He is senior faculty and associate professor at the Center for Applied Imagination at SUNY Buffalo State. As president of Innovation Resources, Inc., he consults, creates training programs, and runs breakthrough labs, and has created a series of courses for Open Sesame. How fun. He is author of several popular books, including Create in a Flash, A Leader's Recipe for Breakthrough Innovation, and the one we're talking about today, Solve the Real Problem. He joins us today from Buffalo, New York. Roger, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Alise. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. We're going to have so much fun talking about how
to have a great time.
To talk about creativity and solving the real problem.
Yes.
So let me thank you for bringing these works into the world. This one, Solve the Real Problem. Very nice, easy read, and just good stuff. And then this one I also read too. Why didn't I think of that? Fantastic.
Thank you.
They're welcome.
A joy to do. They're a joy to do. Yeah.
Isn't it wonderful when work is play? It's just a wonderful thing. So more people to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, so let's just start. One of the things I have just become enamored with in my life and my work, Roger, and my own path is that what I've learned is that everyone has some kind of a personally significant experience or set of experiences in their lives that puts them on a path that makes them able to create something that no one else could have seen or created. It's just their special sauce, their mold. So I think it would be really fun if you could start by telling your story of why creative problem solving is so important to you and where that came from.
Alise, thank you for that. I'm happy to do that. And so the story begins on a farm in northern Colorado. And
as all good stories begin.
As all good stories begin. It could be a farm in Kansas, but it's a farm in northern Colorado, right? And so I was a farm boy, and my mother made me take piano lessons, and I hated piano lessons. And so, but she made me practice them. And she said, someday you'll be glad you took piano lessons. Well, every time I see her now, I tell her that that's the case. Because when I was about 14 years old, a minister at our church gave me a little four-string guitar, a little steel four-string guitar. It was held together with Scotch tape. There was sand in it. And he said, I think you might enjoy this. Go ahead. Well, for the next 3 months, my parents didn't see me because I was in the basement practicing and learning how to play guitar. I eventually started teaching at a guitar studio, and I played guitar in rock bands and in college and stuff. And then I set off to the University of Northern Colorado thinking that I was going to be a music major, going to be a guitarist and a music major guitar teacher. Well, I got into my first semester, my first year of college, and I became very, very frustrated because as a music major, when you're a freshman, you spend most of your time in a practice room about 6 by 6. You don't talk to people very much. And the whole focus was on technique, how to get better at the instrument. I understand that now. But I wanted to do some creative stuff with because when I was growing up on a farm, I was fortunate to build tree houses and build go-karts and do all those things that you can do and rafts on ponds and stuff. My parents encouraged me to do that. And so here I am. I'm a freshman at the University of Northern Colorado, getting really frustrated about my education. And I came across this program called the Individualized Education Program. And essentially, it was you take a couple of classes, but then you meet with a faculty mentor every week to design your own education. It was based on the English model, the Oxford model. So I began working with a young anthropologist who's also a musician, a sculptor, a sailor, a horse farmer, my goodness, a piano tuner, just a real Renaissance guy. And I thought I was going to focus on creating guitar studios or something like this. And then I noticed something. I noticed that my younger students were really getting bored playing the guitar, like, 2 or 3 notes on the E string. It was just awful for them. So I had the idea. I thought if I could get my students to get more creative, they might enjoy their music more. And so I started reading about creativity. And I think I kept the University of Northern Colorado bookstore in business in the summer of 1976 because I read everything I could possibly find on creativity. And in the spring of 1977, it's April, I'm at my parents' house. As I'm reading through the literature and looking at the bibliographies, there's 2 names and one place that keeps coming up consistently in the literature. One is Dr. Sidney J. Parnes, and another is Dr. Ruth Noller, and this place called the Center for Applied Interdisciplinary Center for Creative Studies at the State University College at Buffalo. All right. So I go to the microfiche at the university, and I take the microfiche, find the phone number of the place, and then it's April, and I'm at my parents' house, and so I dialed the phone number. I got the courage to dial the phone number.
Note the rotary dial,
Note
yes.
the rotary dial.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Note the rotary.
I got it. Mhm.
I dialed the phone number, and I talked to the secretary, and I explained to him that what I was interested in, and she said, "Well, Roger, Dr. Parnes is here. Would you like to talk to him?" Now, Alise, I'd never talked to an author before in my life. I mean, I'm 21, 22 years old. All the authors that I knew were dead, and so to talk to this guru, this creativity author guy, I was ecstatic. I talked with Dr. Parnes. We had a wonderful conversation. He said, we've got this conference that we host every year, and we started this master's degree program in creativity. You might be interested in that. So I hung up the phone. I ran up the stairs. I said to my mom, Mom, I just talked to Sid Parnes in Buffalo, New York. Do you know what she said? She said, "What? You made a long-distance phone call?" Long distance phone calls from rural Northern Colorado were pretty expensive back then. Well, I went out that summer in April, in June, to attend the creativity conference and take a course, and I was on fire. And when I got back, my mom and dad said that's all you could talk about was your work in creativity and what was going on. And so I finished up my degree at the University of Northern Colorado, moved out to Buffalo in June of 1978, got my master's degree in creativity studies in 1979. I think I was about the 7th person to do that. And now we've graduated over 400 folks. And that's gone from there. So I was on faculty from 1984 to 1994, and then went part-time to work on my consulting business. And now I've formally retired, so I'm associate professor emeritus, but I'm far from retired. And so
Please don't retire. We need to.
This is so much fun. Why would people retire to do stuff that they love to do? Why would you not keep doing the stuff that you love to do? So I'm having the time of my life, and I really appreciate this interview, Alise.
Oh, you're so welcome. What a great way to start. I love it when people are passionate about what they do, and that's such a great story about how you got into creativity. And the thing that I find so interesting about your work, why it's so compelling, and one of the major reasons I wanted to have you on the program, and I align with this, and this is so interesting what you say, we have been taught to find answers to problems, not to question the problem itself. Mm-hmm. And I'm so amazed. I mean, even the young people are they're going to school and they're trying to find the answer. What does the teacher want for the answer? Oh my gosh, that frightens me. So if you could speak a bit to this problem here, this conditioning that we have, the traditional way we tend to go about this problem solving.
Yeah, well, it's my contention that we're still using the same strategies that we used in elementary school to solve complex, difficult, potentially dangerous problems. And it's because we've been taught to find answers to problems, not to question the problem itself. And the example I use is this. It's like I ask someone, well, what's 3 plus 3? They'll say 6, okay? What's the capital of Spain? Madrid, what's the name of the third planet from the sun? They have to think for a minute, but it's Earth, okay? And so the problem has already been set up for us. But what we're faced with today is the problems aren't set up for us. There's all these challenges out there, all these things that we need to deal with, and we don't quite know how to enter to solve the problems. And an example of this might be I did one of the folks that we talk about in the book did a study where they combined engineering students and art students. This is the University of Georgia, and they taught and they brought them together because the engineering department thought that their engineers needed to be getting a little more creative. Right? And so at the end of the semester, so one week they taught them engineering skills, engineering problem solving skills. 1 week they taught them artistic problem solving skills. At the end of the semester, they have their presentation in front of the engineering faculty and the art faculty. And this one young engineer stands up and he says, I don't think I learned anything in here because they taught us to find problems to solve. But when I go out and become a practicing engineer, my clients are just going to give me the problem. I'll solve it. The head of the engineering department, a very distinguished man, stands up. My friend says, stands up and yells. He goes, no. He goes, if you have found out how to determine or how to find problems or how to find problems, you've learned probably the most important skill you can learn. Because problems aren't going to be presented to you. You're going to have to discern how to break them apart, how to find an entry point to solve them. So we haven't been taught that way. And so what this book focuses on is giving you some methods to help you discover what the real problem is.
Mm-hmm. And so then you give us this whole, which I want to dive into as much as we can here, but the solution you say that, is actually problem definition. And so this whole practice of, really delving into the problem. And so the creativity that comes with that is fascinating. In fact, tomorrow, Roger, I'm presenting at a diversity, equity, and inclusion summit. And I'm going to talk about how our uniqueness is such a wonderful way to contribute our creativity and contribute to innovation. Yeah. So anyway, so if you could speak a little bit about this notion of problem definition.
Yeah. So, and back to that whole diversity, creativity thrives on diversity. The more diverse the group, the more innovative the ideas. And we have stuff built kind of around that as well. So talking about the whole thing of problem definition. Well, so the way we redefine problems is we ask questions, but we don't just ask any kinds of questions. We ask creative questions. So for example, let's try this. We don't have enough money. It's too expensive. That's not a question. That's a statement. All right. And when you say those things, that blocks your thinking. That sends a message to your brain that there aren't any ideas out there. So why bother looking for those ideas? If we try this, how might we reduce the cost? How might we find the funding for the ideas? How might we get other people involved in the project? Those last three are creative questions, and they tell your mind to go to search for some answers to solve it. And we use the word might, but explicitly, because it's not how can we, how might we? Because might asks you to speculate, to think about what might be. We don't know yet, but what might be. And the other thing is, not just one creative question, not just two creative questions, but 15, 20, 30 creative questions. And the idea is the problem you see is the problem that you solve. The problem that you see is the problem that you solve. So if you're able to see many problems, then you can pick the best problem to solve. And as a matter of fact, when we were working on the book, we played around with the title a little bit. And one of the words that we used was to solve the best problem. And folks don't quite get that. So a good friend of mine advocated for solving the real problem. And so that's what the title of the book was. Interestingly enough, is that we don't know if it's the real problem until we solve it, right? But we're miles ahead if we come up with a whole bunch of different problem definitions or creative questions, as opposed to taking the first creative question or the first problem that comes to mind. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's so delicious. And I what I like about this too.
Delicious. I love that word. Yeah.
It is so delicious. And what I love about this is that I think, well, and I'll even put myself in this camp, Roger. I mean, for the longest time, I didn't like problems or encountering problems because problems gets in the way of achieving things. And I like achieving things.
Right.
But then there's this thing of you could take delight in actually finding the problem and then actually looking for various ways to solve it. Now that's fun.
That's fun. Yeah. And a problem is just a gap from where we are to where we want to be. And from where we are to where we want to be. And we don't grow. J.P. Guilford, one of the great psychologists that ever lived, said we grow by solving problems. We grow intellectually by solving problems. And that's what makes us human. We solve problems. And they don't have to be these big, huge, daunting things. But one of the things that we find is that if we take these big, huge, daunting things, come up with some creative questions, we can find an entry point to begin to solve them and move it forward. So, yeah.
Well, along those lines, you might be glad to know, Roger, that I am quoting you in my presentation tomorrow.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
when
Please.
I open the
Oh,
conversation, I'm
thank
quoting
you.
your quote of to be creative is to be human.
Yes.
So, sir, you are kicking off the presentation tomorrow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Record it. I want to see it.
All right, let's take our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We're on the air with Dr. Roger Firestien. He's a senior faculty and associate professor at the Center for Applied Imagination at SUNY Buffalo State and president of Innovation Resources, Inc., where he consults, creates training programs, and runs breakthrough labs. We've been talking a bit about where his love of creativity came from, and we're starting to talk about how we can start to look at finding the real problem and going about looking at it from that direction. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. One of the things that is a wonderful benefit about hosting this program is because I read my guest books cover to cover, and I'm a researcher, what that does is that means that about every year or so, I find myself getting another book out. So my latest book came out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it for leaders to help you understand the lay of today's workforce land. What do they really want from their work and their leadership? And then I give you 22 best practices to be able to fold that into your culture to actually create that for them. You can find the book on Amazon or at my website, alisecortez.com. If you are just joining the program today, my guest is Dr. Roger Firestien. He's the author of several popular books, including Create in a Flash, A Leader's Recipe for Breakthrough Innovation, and the one we're talking about today, Solve the Real Problem. So before we get into a little bit more of the ingredients of how you go about this, Roger, I think it would be good for you to situate for us from your perspective why you believe that creative problem solving is so essential for progress and fulfillment in today's world.
Yeah. As you've read, we teach a process for creativity, and it's first identify a goal, get the data, figure out what the problem is, generate ideas, refine them, put them into action. And so if I was to give you the book definition of creative problem solving, it would be something like creative problem solving is a repeatable, simple way to take on new challenges and develop innovative solutions that create productive change. Pretty good. Okay. However, yeah, right.
I was going to say, I think you can do better than that.
I think we can too. All right. And as a result of my work and over these years, I believe that creative problem solving is a life-giving process because it helps you to see possibilities that you could never have imagined. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I'm at with the work right now. This is a way to dramatically help people live better, more fulfilled lives. And when you take a course with me, we don't work on case problems or anything like that. We work on stuff that's important to you. And so you'll go through this creative problem solving process. You'll learn this process, but you'll also maybe develop a new business, make your relationships better, find a better ways to work in your community, and of course, come up with new products or services, those sorts of things. But in the meantime, you begin to realize that you have resources inside you that you never really tapped before. And you also realize how important it is to work with a diverse group of people so that you can come up with a diverse bunch of ideas. And so that being the case, when people leave a workshop or one of the programs that I do, you can, and the reason why I still do this work is because you can see the light bulbs going on.
Yeah, totally.
When I was teaching full time at the university, I taught the entry level graduate class because I wanted to see the students' the light bulbs go on in students' eyes. And that's where this stuff works. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it can make such a great difference in people's lives. We think differently.
Well, so what you're doing then, Roger, is you're turning people on. You're actually turning people on. I love that. This is so inspiring. I wanted to be able to situate that before we got into more of your system and methodology, because I wanted people to see the promise, the excitement, the possibility for themselves.
It's life-giving. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's share with them your creative problem-solving pit stop methodology, if you will. There's 4 steps. Will you talk us through?
Yeah. So the first step, let me talk you through the 4 steps, then let me talk about what makes it happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first step is clarify the problem. Let's figure out what the problem is. Once you've clarified the problem, generate ideas. Once you've generated those ideas, develop those solutions. Once you have developed solutions, put those ideas into action. So clarify the problem, generate ideas, develop solutions, plan for action. Now, that is sort of a natural pattern of thought. That's kind of the way we think. And if we go back and take a look at the early studies of creativity, that's kind of the way it shook out. Figure out what the problem is, get some ideas, make the idea better, put it into action. What we're able to do now is do that deliberately and explicitly. And so if you take a look in the book, we have little diamond diagrams. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And those indicate diverge, come out with lots and lots, and then converge. So when we clarify the problem, first, we just kind of identify a goal, and we use the phrases, it would be great, or I wish. And we use those phrases, it would be great if, or I wish, because that moves you forward. It gives you a forward focus. It's like, boy, I wish I could write a book that everybody loved. Okay, great. You don't know how to do it yet. Okay, but that's what you want to accomplish. And language plays a big part of this. So we gather a little bit of data about it. Then we generate a bunch of creative questions. How to, how might, 15, 20, 30, 40. Okay. You can do that in 5 minutes, by the way, and we can talk about that. And then we select the best of those creative questions. So we converge in. We gently take a look at what's the best looking creative questions. Once we've got the base of the best looking creative questions, we generate lots of ideas for solving that. We then select the best of those ideas. Then we refine those ideas using a technique called pluses, potentials, concerns, which is looking at what's good about the idea, the potentials in the idea, any concerns we have about the idea before we launch it. Then we generate a whole bunch of possible action steps, diverging out again. Then we converge on the key action plan. So that's the process. But the thing that drives it is this whole idea of thinking first divergently, lots and lots of stuff, don't judge, strive for quantity, and then gently coming in and converging. First, just taking a look at the ideas that sort of sparkle at you, that are interesting, that you can move forward, and then moving them into more concrete concepts. So yeah, that's the process.
It's wonderful. And I really appreciated that you I think you encourage to find 40 different ways to clarify the problem, for which which obviously is takes a little bit of a reach after a while. And I like that, though. And you even say that oftentimes the bottom third are the more interesting ones, the more useful, creative ones.
Yes. Well, one of the research, some of the research that we've done, we counted the number of ideas the groups came up with, and then we kind of took a look at the nature of those ideas. And about the first third were the usual ideas, usually the ideas that people had thought of before. Okay, we got those out. Okay, great. The second third, people get a little goofy. They've lost they're into different new territory now. And those can be kind of the goofy ones that might create some breakthroughs. But it's the third when people start to build off of the other stuff, that's where the innovation comes. That's where the new ideas come from. And so I tell a group, if you're sitting around generating 10 or 12 ideas and you think you're getting creative, you're not.
Yeah.
because creativity comes in the stretch. Innovation comes in the stretch. So, yeah, it's not difficult to do that. I mean, 5 minutes is easy to generate 40, 50 ideas. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's where I wanted to go next is
Yeah.
one of the things that I also found really encouraging as somebody who tends to be a little impatient. And I like my
Mhm.
to-do list is always way longer than how much time do I have to do
I-
anything, right? So one of the things I appreciated, you talk about fallacies in your book.
yeah,
And one of the fallacies you talk about is that it takes a long time to find a real problem. And
yes.
you go on to say, no, it doesn't. So you talk about really even just 5 minutes, just taking those 5 minutes to be able to just go through this process makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up. And what that is based on, it's based on a research study. And as I was putting the book together, I began to do a lot of to take a look at the academic research on this. And in this study, what they did was they took one group of students, they gave them instructions for a problem to solve. They said, go solve the problem. Okay, they went up
Yes.
to solve it. Another group of students, they gave them the problem. They said, take whatever time you need to redefine what the problem is. Just go ahead. And once you've redefined it, then go ahead and generate ideas. Well, the group that redefined the problem generated much more original, interesting, useful, creative ideas, as opposed to the group that just went right to work on it. And so when I read the study, Alise, it was like, well, that's interesting, but how much time did they give these people to redefine the problem? And I knew the researcher, and so I emailed Mark and I said, what was the time frame on this? And he said, well, Roger, he said, we really didn't give him a time frame. He said, we said, take as much time as you need, whatever you need. But in actuality, those students took between 5 to 6 minutes to come up with alternate definitions of the problem. So the question is, can you afford to spend 5 minutes to find the real problem? And the flip side of that is, can you afford to spend 5 minutes? Or can you not to? So can you
Right.
afford to spend 5 minutes to solve the real problem, find the real problem, or can you not to? And it's just 5 minutes, just stepping back for 5 minutes. So just pause. Yeah.
I found that just really, really compelling. I needed to hear that just for me, Roger. So thank you. Anybody else get any benefit? Great, but
Yeah.
I needed that.
Me too, Alise. I mean, and it's because we've been taught that, the faster you solve the problem, the smarter you are.
Oh, and that's where I wanted to go next, my friend. I wanted you to tell the story of little Roger.
Oh,
I love the picture in your book. I remember how old you were about, you're in elementary school math class. Tell that story and why that's important to what we're talking about today.
so one of the third fallacies, and I have the book here. I'm going to read just a little bit from it. So
Okay.
as written by the author. Right? And so we had a lot of fun. There's a picture of me here in third grade, and I weigh 66.5 pounds. So, boy, not even close to that now. So the third fallacy is, the faster you can solve the problem, the smarter you are. And so here's the scene. I'm 8 years old. I'm in third grade in Mrs. Tollenberg's class at Tozer Primary School in Windsor, Colorado. The year is 1964. And so now it's time for math. And to get the class actively involved in learning, Mrs. Tollenberg has this game called Travel, and it uses flashcards. And so the way it works is one student stands up next to another person's desk. All right. Mrs. Tollenberg puts the card out there. The person that gets the answer first is the winner, and they get to travel to the next person. Okay. And so, what's 2 + 2? 4. Whoever can blurt out the answer first is the winner, and they get to travel around the room and they get some little prize, right? I was horrible at that game, all right? Absolutely horrible. And once in a while, I could beat the person that was next to me, but I wouldn't make it
Bobby.
before.
Bobby was the guy.
Bobby,
Yeah.
Bob. Oh, what do we name Bob? Bobby, Bobby Gilbert. Oh man! So this guy could go all the way around the room 2 or 3 times, right? And so in my child mind at third grade is because I wasn't good at travel or getting the answer really quickly in math. I wasn't good in math. And so that was it with my head. I made it through 10th grade geometry. That was it. Then I go to graduate school and you have to take statistics. And Alise, I was terrified.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God. Well, I found that when I was taking statistics, I kind of liked it. And it made sense to me. And you could take time to figure out what the real problem was and you could solve them. And so when I graduated, I actually ended up with a graduate minor in statistics. So, but the fallacy is the faster you can solve the problem, the smarter you are. And that's absolutely not true at all. It's just that he was better at math in a quick way. Doesn't mean that he was better at math. He was just better at coming up with the answer quicker. And so, you just needed a little bit more time to come up with the answer. And so we fall into this trap that we have to solve the problem immediately. No, 5 minutes. Just start with 5 minutes. Now, when we work on big organizational challenges, we'll spend, and this is really interesting, maybe 20 minutes redefining the problem. But to do that, we have a group of folks doing this. We facilitate it. We bring in folks from the outside called creative catalysts. And in 20 minutes, we can come up with 160, 150 different creative questions. And then the client can select the ones that work the best, and then we can go and blow out and get more ideas because they're trained in using this process. But, Bobby Gilbert, I'm telling you, always beat me at travel. And he beat just about everybody too. So, but yeah, so that was the story. You don't have to get the answer fast to be good at something.
Yeah, I guess I want to take a moment to reinforce, inadvertently the teacher,
Right.
gave you the message that you weren't good at math. She was
Oh,
trying to engage people and get them
absolutely.
going.
Yeah.
Totally unintentional. However, that unintended consequence,
Right.
it can happen all the time inside organizations with leaders. And so, being mindful of how you're stewarding this creativity process and encouraging people and such, so important.
And learn. Yeah, to her credit, I mean, she was trying to do her best to engage students with using what she had at that time. It was engaging, but I wonder what about what the kid thought that never got to stand up?
Exactly.
Who never got to stand up, and what's going on with their head
Exactly.
learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to make. So I just I'm so grateful that you found statistics later on in life so that you could have that improper mindset or belief eradicated or removed or rewritten. So we all need that, as you know. We need to rewrite our tapes.
Yeah, and we need to unlearn things too. Yeah.
Unlearn things. Absolutely. That is critical. We talk about it in this program quite a bit. So on that note, let's let our listeners and viewers think about what they might need to unlearn while we take our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We've been on the air with Dr. Roger Firestien. He's a senior faculty and associate professor at the Center for Applied Imagination at SUNY Buffalo State and the president of Innovation Resources, where he consults, creates training programs, and runs breakthrough labs. We've been talking a bit about his methodology to getting to the real problem and to generating ideas, etc. After the break, we're going to continue on. We're also going to talk about a way to get this insight in an organization in a way that really, really lifts and informs the culture. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. As I mentioned in the last break about my latest book that came out in March of 2023, The Great Revitalization, what I did for you is I created a 3-page assessment that you can pull off my website, gusto-now.com. And you can then use that to determine the extent to which your workforce is or your workplace is ready for today's standards, to the extent that it really is a destination workplace. So you can find that there. If you are just joining us, my guest is Dr. Roger Firestien. He's the author of several popular books, including Create in a Flash, A Leader's Recipe for Breakthrough Innovation, and the one we're talking about today, Solve the Real Problem. So before we go further, I was going to ask you this earlier, and then I got excited about some of your stories, but I did think it would be good, that you talk a little bit about the rest of the system here, that after you generate these many creative questions, then you move to selective creative questions using this process of hits, cluster, and restate. I think that's very useful to help our listeners and viewers just add a little bit more, bolt on more of your process.
Yeah, happy to do that. So here's the reasoning behind that, Alise. So let's say you've generated 30 creative questions. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go over and say, well, it's that creative question, that one. Okay? Because if that's the case, why have you taken all that time to generate all those 30 creative questions anyway? So this is the converging stage of the process where we talk about this gentle converging. So the first thing we do is we go through and take a look at all the creative questions, and we use Post-its. Thank goodness for Post-its.
I love my Post-its.
Man, I was in this business before we were using Post-its, and that's why my handwriting is so bad. That's one excuse, all right? And so
You're a doctor. That's the other.
yeah, that's and so let's say you have a flip chart with 25 or 30 Post-its on it. We give people little colored dots, and so I'll give you so we're working on your challenge. You go up and you just dot the hits, and these are creative questions that provide a new insight, indicate a promising direction, capture the problem for you, nail it, feels good in your gut, because there's no problem I've ever worked on, no matter how technically pure it appears, that there isn't some intuition about it. There isn't some feeling about it. Either you're frightened about it, you're excited about it, and that's going to influence the kind of creative questions you choose. So go through the list first, put a dot on the idea, on the creative questions that are a new insight, a new direction, feels good, nails it for you. The next step is to relate those hits together into themes. So we cluster them. We ask the question, which of these hits relate to each other? And then we label that cluster with a new creative question. And then from there, what we do is we generally will come up with, like, if we have 30 creative questions, we'll probably maybe have 4 or 5 clusters. And then I would ask you, I say, okay, Alise, right now, what's the creative question that you want to get some ideas on right now? What's the most important creative question? What's the creative question that if we were to make progress on that would help you to solve your goal that you're going after? And then we generate ideas for that. So it's a gentle converge. First mark the hits, cluster the hits together, restate the cluster, then choose the creative question. The beautiful thing about that is if you make progress on one creative question, great, and you still need to work on the other creative questions, you don't have to go back to the entire process. You can just start at the end of clarifying the problem, say, okay, let's get some ideas for this creative question now. Let's get some ideas for this creative question now. So you don't have to begin the process again, because the questions are all laid out for you already. The problems are already given to you in that case.
In some ways, Roger, it reminds me a lot of the coding and analysis process that I did for my meaning and work and identity research. Just the way that you describe that, it just, especially when you talk about, the hits, the clusters, and the restates, very interesting. So, of course, that really gets my juices going.
Is that inductive reason or deductive? That's inductive.
Inductive, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So
yeah, inductive.
inductive,
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what was going on in my
Woo-hoo!
mind.
Inductive
I
reason.
know. Right, I know. Don't get this. We only cover the exciting things in this program. Right? Only.
We're talking about inductive reasoning.
Well, okay. So now then let's go on to even more fun.
Right.
This whole notion, I mean, for me, mindset is a really, really interesting idea. Well, pun intended.
Yeah.
But you talk about 4 problem-solving mindsets, and I think that's really interesting to talk through and kind of just discern maybe which, might be useful for whatever you're working on. So let's talk about those next.
I would love to. So the way we did the book, and if we get time, I'll talk about the genesis of the book. But the way to answer this question, the way we did the book is I interviewed people from business, medicine, education, aeronautics, aviation, manufacturing, finance, everyday life. And I asked them one question. I said, can you give me an example of a problem that you were working on that really wasn't the problem at all? So they were solving the wrong problem. And the folks that I interviewed were just gracious. They were wonderful with their time. And we came up with all these wonderful examples. And so we can talk about a couple of those if we like. But when I analyzed the responses, I found that they fell into sort of 4 mindsets. And one was challenge your assumptions. Don't assume that you know what the problem is. Challenge your assumptions. The second one is to get an outside perspective. And the way you solve that is you get other folks involved. You build on the diversity that you're talking about. So challenge your assumptions, get an outside perspective. Now, the other 2 kind of use a visual example. So one is see the big picture, look broad. And then the opposite of that is look for all the details. And so those mindsets work together. But if you can say, look, can I challenge my assumptions here? Or am I looking at the big picture? Am I seeing all the details? You can sort of ask yourself that. Am I really getting an outside perspective? And so those were how those mindsets settled out. And so that's how we organize the last half of the book. And we tell stories that focus on challenging your assumptions, looking at the big picture, getting all the details. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to dial into two pieces here. One thing that I really want to call out and under the get an outside perspective that I thought was really useful, and I want to champion here for our listeners and viewers, is you talk about how some organizations, in order to make sure that they create that diverse sort of workforce, the diverse sort of perspectives, they hire 25% of their new workforce without industry experience.
Yes.
I can't tell you how often in my early recruiting days, 25 years ago when I started, they'd always say, "Oh, they don't have telecom experience. We can't hire them."
Right.
I mean, just crazy. So I want to bring that home as, hire outside your industry. If you want if you want creativity and innovation, start there.
Because they don't know what can't be done. They don't.
Yeah,
know
they don't assume, they haven't been taught all the ways that it can't be done.
Right.
Can't.
Right.
Okay, now you got to tell the story. I love the story of the Boeing engineer and the windshield wipers. You got to tell that story.
Oh, I love that story. So the story goes like this. In the late 1970s, a young engineer named Scott Kempshall gets a job for the Boeing goes to work for Boeing, and he's assigned to the 747 cockpit crew. And on the fourth day of work, this mechanism lands on his desk, and it's got an arm sticking out on a windshield wiper, and there's some motors and stuff. And it was the windshield wiper for the 747. Now, the interesting thing about the 747 is that's that big, beautiful airplane that's got that big hump up there in the front. Now, what happened because of the design of the airplane, when the 747 would take off, what the airflow over the hump would essentially blow the windshield wipers off the windshield. So the pilot could not see the runway on takeoff and landing in rain or snow.
Right, no problem.
Very bad thing for the pilot of a 747 not seeing the runway. And so Scott's job, so the way this mechanism worked was it measured the airspeed, it actuated a motor that tightened a spring that then would hold the windshield wipers down. Each of these mechanisms cost $10,000 each, for a total of $20,000. They each weighed 20 pounds, which is an additional 40 pounds to the aircraft. You don't want to add weight to the aircraft. And because the mechanism was complicated, it would need to be replaced about every 10 years. Right? So to replace this mechanism, you had to take the airplane out of service for 10 days, pull the whole front of the airplane off to get in just to replace the windshield wiper mechanisms. Okay, it's Scott's fourth day of work, all right? He's getting a tour of the Boeing plant. And he said, Roger, I walked into the 747 assembly building. He said, first off, the buildings are so big that clouds form in the ceiling of these things.
I remember you saying that. That was amazing.
God. Yeah, amazing. And he said, Roger, I was just awestruck. Here's a 747 just about ready to come off the line, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. So here's young Scott Kempshall walking through the plant with his guide, and he comes upon this bin of scrap metal. And he said they were kind of curved and they kind of looked like a little scoop to me. And so he asked his guide, he said, well, what are these? And his guide said, well, we had a railing that was a little too long in the design. We had to clip this off. And so this is just scrap. And Scott goes, well, can I take a couple of those? And his guide goes, yeah, we're just going to scrap this stuff. So Scott said he had an idea. And he said, they looked like little scoops to me. And so what he did was he mounted it on the windshield wiper. And they put it in the wind tunnel. And he said if they looked like little scoops, and his idea was as the air pressure would go over, it would push this little scoop or this little sail down on the windshield. Tried it once, didn't work. All right. Tried it another time, didn't work. Finally, he adjusts these little scoops, these little pieces of scrap metal on the windshield wipers. And he said, we tried rain, we tried snow, anything. We could not get them to raise off the windshield wipers. So this was a scrap piece of metal. It's called a flow spoiler. All right. It is on just about most commercial aircraft right now because it's so effective. And it looks kind of like a little sail. It sits on the windshield wipers of the 747. And now when the airplane takes off, the air pressure just naturally pushes it down. Right? So if we run the numbers out, and it's something like, to change the lifespan of the airplane was 30 years. Boeing made about 1,500 of these. So if it takes every about 10 years, you have to replace the mechanism. So that's about $300 a mechanism, $300,000 a mechanism. The number in $1980 is like 480 million to replace the windshield wipers in the fleet. Now it's like $1.4 billion just to replace the windshield wipers in the fleet. And with Scott's design, it can be replaced in about 2 hours for $2,000. So it saved the airline industry billions of dollars. And the other thing is it kept 3.5 billion people safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's not underestimate that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
well, so the moral of the story there, right? And fresh eyes, fresh
that's
perspective. And he was given, and that's where I want to go next. He
Yeah.
was given the rein to do this, given the opportunity to go and work on this. And that's
Yeah.
where I want to go.
Okay.
I love what you talk about in this book. But in order for this to be able to happen, in order for Scott, the Boeing engineer, to be able to do this, there had to be the right air in the organization to do that. And you talk about 4 aspects of that. And since we also do a lot on the show to be able to help develop organizations and leaders to create them as such, let's talk about how do we make the air right?
How to make the air right. And we can talk a little bit more about what we mean by making the air right if we have time.
Yes.
But there's 4 things. And one of the things that we did is we used this when we helped Mazda Motor Manufacturing USA put their plant online in the late 1980s and save them about $60 million in plant startup. So there's several things. One is, first, people need to have creativity skills. They need to know how to be creative, like what we're talking about. And then there's the environment. So you can't just give creativity skills and say, okay, here, just go. You have to create an environment that supports that. So one is a commitment to improvement. And so what happens most of the time is when people are hired for a job, it's like, here's how to do the job, go do it.
Right.
It's not like, here's how we do the job now, but your job is to make it better, make it quicker, okay, improve on the job. So a commitment to improvement is part of the environment. A mistake-friendly attitude.
Huge.
If you take a look at Scott, he made a mistake the first few times, and the second time, the third time, and the fourth time, and maybe the 10th time. But when he tried it out, eventually the thing worked, and it still works. Values, employee input, insights. Organizations, people want to feel valued,
Yes.
and they want to see that they make a difference in the organization. And so first, you need creativity skills. You need an environment that supports that, which consists of a commitment to improvement, mistakes-friendly attitude, values, employee attitude, insights, and then application. Once you apply that to an organization, the output is an innovation output. But you have to have all of those things there to make it work.
Oh, see, so that's just so important. And that's part of what I'm talking about tomorrow at this conference, is to be able to create an environment like that where people can feel like I can bring my individual unique self to bear on this issue, this opportunity, this problem, to be able to innovate or to creatively solve it.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, it happens fast, Roger. We're already at the end of the show.
Right,
Yeah,
good.
we're already at the end of the show. So this show, as you probably know, is listened to by people around the world who care about trying to get into a place where they are in these destination workplaces where they can realize their potential. They're led by inspirational leaders that lead them to their greatness. We do business that betters the world. What would you like to leave them with?
I'd like to leave them with this. Just really simply that we are all creative and we can learn to be deliberately creative. And so it's not a myth. It's not something possessed only by a gifted few, because that's what makes us human. And we can actually turn on our creativity at will instead of waiting for ideas to just happen. We're all creative. We can all be deliberately creative, and we can turn on our ideas at will instead of just waiting for them to happen. That's what I'd like to leave with you folks.
What a brilliant way to finish, Roger. It's a delight to know you and to learn from you and to share you with my listeners around the world. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
My pleasure, Alise. My pleasure.
Listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn how to connect with this man and follow his work, or even check into his resources or his courses. So the best way that you can find him is just his personal website. It's rogerfirestien.com. Let me spell that for you. Roger, R-O-G-E-R. Firestien is a little different. F-I-R-E-S-T-I-E-N. rogerfirestien.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on with Jerry Coluna, the former venture capitalist and now executive coach, talking about his beautiful new book, Reunion, Leadership and the Longing to Belong. He helps shed light on why a sense of belonging is so profoundly important to human thriving and how leaders and team members can help nurture a sense of belonging in the workplace. It was an incredibly elevating conversation, really, really beautiful. And yes, he did move me to tears once. Next week, we'll be on the air again with Dr. Raj Sisodia. He's the co-founder of the Global Conscious Capitalism Movement, this time talking about his 13th new book, Awaken, The Path to Purpose, Inner Peace, and Healing. It is his most personal and vulnerable book yet and shines a light on how we can achieve this kind of life for ourselves. See you there. And remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.